and welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name is Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. First, I want to start today's show by asking you all a question. When was the last time you actually gave yourself permission to truly feel? And I'm not just talking about brushing up against an emotion or even a moment in time, but really letting yourself sink into something without rushing it, without holding back, or even feeling numb. Now, it is a really simple question, but if we're honest, many of us rarely let that happen. Now, before I get into today's topic, I want to take a moment and thank everybody for all of your well wishes. Yes, I'm probably about 95% over my COVID. Still got a little bit of congestion. You can hear I'm not as warm walking death as I was last week, but thank you for all of your well wishes. I want to thank all of your new listeners who've been coming in, all of my old listeners for all of your support. You're literally the reason my show continues to grow, and that support means a lot to me. And if you really enjoy what you hear, please do me a favor, especially if you're on Spotify, which is where my main hosting of the show is. Like, subscribe, follow. Go to, if you have the Spotify app, go there, click the three little dots, hit rate my show, click it 5 stars. This allows me to keep the show for free, keeps reaching a wider audience for people who may need to hear this. There's been so much growth this year, and I really appreciate all of that. And if you do want to support my show a little bit further, you can find a donation link in the description of it. Every little contribution helps me keep bringing you these really important conversations and some of the interviews that I've done, especially even this year, and the ones I'm going to be bringing you in the new year. So, what are we going to really dive into today? Well, I'm talking about eroticism. Now, before your mind jumps straight to sex, I want to pause. I want you to hit the pause button for a moment. Eroticism is much more than that. It's the imagination. It's that energy to fuel our sensuality and our humanity. It's about being fully alive and aware of our desires, our emotions, and our connections. In a lifestyle, eroticism holds even a deeper layers, right? Especially for all of us that connect to it. It ties into our self-awareness, our vulnerability, and the unique ways we connect with ourselves and our partners. Now, understanding this isn't just important for enhancing our intimacy or our play. It's crucial for our growth, our self-care, or even our healing. And today, we're going to explore how embracing eroticism can deepen our self-care, enhance our dynamics, and support our psychological healing. Now, whether you're new to the lifestyle, you're a seasoned veteran, you've got a few years of spanking under your belt, or, if you think you'll find something valuable in today's discussion, stick around. Because I think we all can benefit about learning a little bit more about what eroticism truly means, right? So let's go ahead, let's dive into it, let's start unpacking all of this. So let's take a deeper dive into what we mean by eroticism, especially since it's a term that often gets overshadowed by the more obvious topic of sex, right? And we see this a lot play out, especially on social media. We see it on forums like fetish.com or especially FetLife or Instagram, right? Eroticism is distinct, very distinct from sex. It's not just about what we do with our bodies, but what happens with our minds, our emotions, our imagination. It's the energy that fuels desire, the way a touch lingers, or how anticipation builds a moment into something truly unforgettable. Now, for example here, think about the sensation of fingertips barely grazing your skin. Is it the touch itself that's erotic? Or is it the way that it awakens the sense of longing and curiosity or vulnerability? Eroticism isn't about being confined to any one act or moment. It's about the context, the emotion, and that space that we create for desire to breathe and expand. Now, from a psychological standpoint here, eroticism ties back to some of our earliest experiences. Our understanding of touch, the way our boundaries were honored or even violated by our caregivers. And the dynamics of our early relationships leave lasting impressions. These factors shape Not only what we find pleasurable, but also what make us feel safe, or even what we're afraid to explore. Here's an example, right? Someone who grew up in an environment where maybe physical affection was rare, and they may find the idea of intimate touch both thrilling and overwhelming at the same time. Now, on the flip side, someone who's experienced boundary violations may struggle to trust, even in moments that are supposed to be arousing or connective. In both cases here, eroticism becomes more than just pleasure. It's a reflection of our internal world, our histories, and sometimes our deepest fears. This is where BDSM does enter the conversation. Now, we know that the lifestyle is uniquely suited to explore eroticism because it thrives on intention. Now, whether it's a careful orchestrated scene or the dynamic of the power exchange itself, our sensation or the sensations introduced through the play, BDSM offers us the opportunity to connect with erotic energy in ways that go beyond the surface. Now, let's consider a scenario for a minute. I want you to imagine a submissive kneeling before their dominant. Now, waiting in silence for those instructions that are going to come. Now, on the surface, it might seem like a simple act of obedience, right? But beneath that, there's this whole web of emotions, anticipation, the vulnerability, the trust, the angst, maybe a little bit of fear. The eroticism isn't just about what happens next. It is in that unspoken dialogue, the way the submissive's imagination fills in the gaps and how the dominant holds that space. And that's that moment. We're in it. And eroticism inside of BDSM isn't limited to any one role or activity. A dom might find the act of wielding control deeply sensual, not because of the control itself, but because of the emotional connection it creates. A masochist might find the sting of the whip arousing, not just for the sensation, but for what it represents. Perhaps surrender or resilience or even a catharsis. And I have talked about that before, right? So let me invite you to reflect for a second. What sensations or scenarios ignite your curiosity? And when you think about your erotic self, how much of it is shaped by imagination versus external stimulation? And how often do you give yourself permission to explore these questions without judgment, or worse, self-censorship? Eroticism is more than just a concept here, folks. It's a tool for self-discovery. And in the next thing that I'm going to start talking about, this next segment coming up, we're going to talk about how we embrace your erotic self and how this is going to enhance your play, deepen your relationships, and even promote a little bit of psychological healing, right? Because for a lot of us, there are barriers to our eroticism. And I want to talk about this now. Let's maybe get to the point that what gets in the way for us? What do we create that stops that for us? Because if eroticism is about tapping into imagination, sensation, and emotion, then it's a deeply personal experience and one that many of us struggle to access, right? First, let's look at the societal and maybe even internalized pressures. We live in a world that often tells us, how we should look, maybe how we're going to act, or even feel about our bodies. The impact of our self-criticism or body shame can weigh a lot on our psyches. And maybe you've caught yourself thinking, I'd feel more confident in the scene if I lost weight, or, I can't let someone see me like this. These thoughts are rooted in some parts of cultural conditioning, right? Messages we've absorbed about what's desirable or acceptable. Now, when those messages dominate, they can suppress our ability to feel sensual or free or connected. Now, I'm not talking about if you're having health conditions. That's a different story. And I don't really want to get into body dysmorphia or positivity movements because there's too much nuance in there, and I'm not going to end of the year, and I'm still not 100%, and I don't feel like going into that, right? But what I'm talking about is, I'm not just talking about the external pressures here. For us, there's a lot of psychological barriers that can also stand in the way. Trauma is a huge one. It's why I talk about trauma so much. For many, experiences of betrayal, abuse, or neglect leave really deep scars that don't disappear, right? Grief is another one. Now, whether it's grieving a lost relationship or a version of ourselves we've outgrown or something more abstract, grief can really dull our capacity to feel joy or desire. And then there's this fear, the fear of being vulnerable or getting hurt or exposing parts of ourselves that we've kept hidden for so many years. For example, a person might have a strong desire to explore their submission, but they find themselves holding back because they associate that vulnerability with a weakness or a danger. Or a dominant might struggle to fully engage because they fear being judged for their fantasies or their desires. And these psychological resistances don't just block eroticism, they can create a distance in our relationships and, the worst part, create a distance with ourselves. And this is where BDSM offers this whole unique lens for ourselves, especially inside of the lifestyle. When approached with intention, it can help us navigate these barriers. Trust and communication, we already know, are the foundation of any type of healthy relationship or dynamic, right? I have talked about that until I'm blue in the face. It's why I constantly bring it up. But they're especially important when vulnerability is involved. Now, power exchange and sensory play, for example, they're transformative, but only when both partners feel safe and understood. Now, consider this for a moment. I want you to imagine a scene involving some sensory deprivation, which is a fun pastime for me, right? For some, the removal of sight or sound can heighten other senses. It can create an incredibly erotic experience, but for someone with a history of trauma, being blindfolded might trigger feelings of helplessness or fear. And this is why trust is so critical. Before any scene, open communication allows us to discuss our limits, our triggers, our desires. When I'm working with partners or potential partners, and there's going to be a big scene coming, I'm asking them about medical history, any psychological problems I need to be aware of, their capacity day of, leading up to. I was supposed to have a huge scene last week with some friends, and I can't because I'm not 100% physically. So I can't participate right now because I'm not well. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just I'm not at 100%, and I recognize that, right? But we have to also remember that during scenes, we're doing our check-ins, we're ensuring that our boundaries are being respected, that everything's flowing, we're not changing and doing consent in the moment, right? And if we've negotiated it, aftercare, which does allow us a little bit more connection and reassurance and helps us to integrate this experience that feels really grounding. And if you don't want aftercare, that's fine, because maybe you're going to just ride the wave of the experience itself, right? I've talked about negotiating, the challenging the norms of aftercare, because it's not something everybody does. It's not even something that everybody wants, but I'm not going to go into that. There's already another show out there. You can find it. I've written about the subject on FetLife. As much as people think it's controversial, it's really not, right? Everything we do in this lifestyle is absolutely 100% negotiated. It's not a must. It doesn't make you a terrible person, right? And you've got to kind of drown out some of that noise. I don't want to digress too much here, but look, when trust and communication are lacking, even any well-intentioned play can reinforce barriers rather than break them down. A submissive who feels ignored or unsafe may retreat further into themselves. A dominant who isn't tuned into their partner's needs might inadvertently create a dynamic that feels transactional rather than connective. So when we think about these barriers, I want to ask you this. What messages, societal or internal, are holding you back from fully embracing your erotic self? How comfortable are you discussing your desires or limits with your partner? And finally, what steps can you take to build the kind of trust you need, both not just with yourself, but with somebody else, that allows your eroticism to flourish? Eroticism thrives in an environment not only of safety, but of trust, right? And in this next segment here coming in, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. We're going to talk about some self-care and to understand these things. Because we have to understand that Eroticism really does power a lot what we're doing in our dynamics when we're romantically involved with somebody. And then in BDSM, it drives us further. So these are all the things that we need to keep in mind, right? Now, we've unpacked some barriers to eroticism, right? And I want to turn to something a little bit more actionable here, erotic self-care. Because self-care isn't just about relaxation, it's about vitality, embodiment, reconnecting with yourself in a way that feels more nourishing and alive. Now, one powerful approach here you can do is something called mindful touch. This doesn't just have to be sexual. It's about exploring your body without judgment, and take a moment to notice textures, the temperatures of your skin, the sensations of how things feel to you. How does the, pressure of your hand feel in your skin? What happens when you run your fingers over different surfaces of your body, your arms, your legs, even over something like a blanket or piece of wood? Doing this allows you to tune into your body and your experiences as a source of pleasure and comfort rather than, criticism or shame. If you don't know what feels good to you, how can you expect anyone else to know? And I think that's something that we need to really understand. Another thing you can do here is something what we call, imaginative play. Let your mind wander, right? Create something that excites you or soothes you. Maybe go back into a memory or expand on a fantasy you've had. I don't know, you want to be in the 17th century medieval times, and you have a fantasy about that, or you want to be a Greek goddess or a Greek god. All of those things, anything that's abstract, all of these sensations that you want to explore, this is a way of giving yourself permission to dream without limits. And then there's the sensory part. And this is incredibly grounding and awakening. Lighting a candle with a scent that resonates with you, or play music that stirs something deep inside your mind. Maybe move your body in a way that feels intuitive, whether, stretching or dancing or just simply swaying there. Incorporating some of these things into your self-care routine can help you connect with your senses and allows you a deeper sense of self, especially when it comes to your erotic energy, right? And when we're trying to connect this to the lifestyle, these practices take on an even deeper dimension. Kink scenes, for example, often require us to be really present and attuned, especially to our bodies and our emotions. A well-crafted scene can heighten awareness and sensation, emotion, and a connection in a way that feels almost meditative, right? And we experience this with subspace and dom space. Solo play here is another valuable tool. And let me be clear when I say solo play. Pardon me. I'm not talking about masturbation. It's about exploring what makes you feel alive or aroused or curious. Maybe it's experimenting with different types of textures or toys or movements. Maybe it's about, going through the motions of a scene in your mind better to understand your desires and your boundaries. Solo play can be really a way to reconnect with yourself and then, eventually shared in time. And this can deepen your partnered experiences by giving you a clearer sense of what you want and need, what you like and desire. And as you consider these practices, ask yourself, what self-care mean to me beyond the basics? How can I use my imagination, my body, my senses to nurture my erotic self? And finally, how might these practices support my dynamics with my partner in the lifestyle? Erotic self-care is about reclaiming your body and your desires as a source of strength and joy, right? And in this next part here, I'm going to really talk about like turn-ons and turn-offs, and I really kind of want to bring this all together for you all so you can understand. So, are there, I can hear this question, are there psychological turn-ons and turn-offs to doing this? Well, yeah, because it affects us all. What turns us on and what turns us off, we all have these things that physically and, sexually excite us. And desire is complex when it comes to each person, right? A lot of times it comes down to how we feel about ourselves and the world around us. And at its core, desire is an interplay of psychology, emotion, and physical cues. When we understand what activates or inhibits our erotic energy, we navigate our desires with more awareness and intention. Now, what are common turnoffs? Well, a lot of the times it's actually something a little bit less known but more common that affects people: stress, burnout, or worse, negative self talk. And think about it. When you're overwhelmed with work or you're feeling down on yourself, it's hard to feel sexy or connected to that erotic energy. Stress can block our ability to be present and open, and that shuts down desire. And even the simplest act of speaking negatively about yourself can drain erotic energy and make it harder for you to feel deserving of any types of pleasure. And these blocks, while common, can prevent us from fully experiencing our own sensuality. Just today, it was somebody I was trying to help out and offer advice. They were kind of beating up on themselves a little bit, and I had to keep reminding them to stop doing that, right? That they're not dumb and they're not stupid, that they're not broken. Because it's bad enough if we hear that from a partner, but when we tell ourselves that, we're reinforcing the notion that these things are true, right? And that's one thing, like when I work with people, I don't allow them to degrade themselves in that way because it makes it 10 times harder to break through that we're not these things. Regardless of what conditioning you've had before working with me, I work with you to get that practice to stop and for you to learn to love yourself, right? But on the flip side of all this negativity here, this is where our turn-ons can come in. And they're simple but really powerful acts of self-kindness. If you treat yourself with care, about, maybe you're a little bit about being curious for yourself or exploring your desires without any judgment, all fuel that erotic energy. Maybe it's as simple as taking some time for some self-care, learning to embrace some of the things that you like, right? Try something new or engage in some playfulness. The key is allowing yourself to approach pleasure with openness and non-judgment. Small acts of curiosity and exploration can reignite your desire and make it easier to connect with others and with yourself. And at the root of both of our turn-ons and turn-offs lies our sense of self-worth. Do we feel deserving of our pleasure and that connection? And if we don't, we might unconsciously shut down our desires or push those desires away. But when we recognize our worth, and this allows us to feel worthy of love, affection, desire, and we unlock that deeper connection to our erotic selves. And how does this tie together possibly with BDSM? It allows us to negotiate our boundaries better, to negotiate a scene or what we're willing to do, to explore our fantasies in a healthy, consensual way that can actually help us rekindle our desire. And that the whole process of negotiation of saying yes or no or maybe, it gives us permission to express what we want without shame. And when we approach our desires with clarity and communication openly with ourselves or our partners, it creates an environment where that erotic energy can flow freely. And the act of negotiating also reinforces that we are deserving of the experiences we seek, right? And this all ties back to, guess what? Our self-worth. So ask yourself, what external or internal factors lead to blocking my desire? What small acts of self-care or curiosity could help reignite my erotic energy? And, finally, how can I approach my desire and relationships with an open, non-judgmental mindset so I can experience and enjoy them more? If you can understand or absorb a little bit of this psychology, especially when it comes to our turn-offs and our turn-ons, this becomes this essential piece in creating a really thriving, empowered, erotic life, right? Now, as I wrap up this show today, I want to leave you with a thought. Our erotic energy here isn't something to be controlled or confined. It's something to be understood and explored and embraced. Intentional exploration of our eroticism, whether through self-care, fantasies, or intimate play, can not only deepen our connections to ourselves, but also transform our relationships. And inside of the lifestyle, where vulnerability and trust and our communication are all key points, embracing eroticism here can strengthen our dynamics and create deeper intimacy between us and our partner. And just think about how much richer your connection with a partner can become when you're both attuned to each other's desires and boundaries and emotional needs. And even on your own, you cultivate a more intimate relationship with yourself, right? Isn't that what we want? One that's grounded in self-awareness and curiosity. And that can help you reclaim your erotic energy and make room for true pleasure and a connection you've been seeking. And before I finally wrap this all up and tell you about some other things, I want to encourage you to reflect on your own journey, especially with eroticism. What's something you could do today to get more in tune with your own sensuality? How could that exploration help you connect with others, whether they're lovers or partners or even yourself, in a more meaningful way? Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences on this topic about, what worked for you in exploring your erotic energy. Has it played a role in your relationships? Leave a comment for me on Spotify. Leave a comment for me on FetLife or on Instagram or on X. Love reading all the comments. Really does help others in the community. I think other people, the more that everybody shares, it really takes us from feeling alone to realizing there's more people that are out there that are just like us. A couple of things now. I'm coming to the end of the year, so next week is going to be my final show, final of season 3. Really super excited. I didn't get to do my last show with the gentleman in the UAE. We are working on a time disparity right now between us because there's a time difference. So I'm going to probably get that show out to you all in the new year, right? I'm still really excited to explore BDSM in the Middle East. I really want to learn more about it. It's so fascinating. I want to start talking to people in other parts of the world. South America, I want to hear you, right? I know you all listen to me in Brazil and Argentina and Chile, right? I want to hear from you. Get a hold of me. Let's talk about BDSM in South America. Let's talk about BDSM in Eastern Europe, right? Let's bring you guys into the mix a little bit more. Even España, donde eres, right? Where are you at? Starting to listen to you all a little bit more, right? Let's get in here and talk about all this. My book is still available. Yes, you can 100% get it. Where you can buy it you can download it on the Kindle wherever you buy your ebooks, or it is available for print version, right? Tangled Desires, the intersection between BDSM and psychology. If you are looking for a therapist, feel free. My therapy practice is on the description of every show. You can reach out to me there at enhanced-mind.com or find me through Google, right? Happy to work with some of you all. I will be working intermittently through Christmas because I've still got to work with my veterans. But yeah, I'm going to do one more show, and I think that's just going to wrap it up for the end of the year. And then I'll restart back in about mid-January. And season 4 with you all, it's going to be more exciting. We're going to start bringing in more interviews. We're going to get a little bit more controversial. I'm going to be talking about some darker aspects of our lifestyle. I've stayed away from a lot of topics, but I think it's time to start going into some of them because otherwise it's not me. And let me clarify what I mean. This past weekend, I had an observation about people on their wish lists, and my views upset a lot of people. Well, the problem is nobody really read what I wrote. They just read the fact that I was upset that I was talking about women and their wish lists. I don't have a problem with you all having it. That's fine. Anyone can have a wish list. Don't really care. That wasn't really my issue. What people didn't seem to understand was, and then people start bringing in stuff I wasn't talking about, like sex workers or OnlyFans. I don't care about them. Or content creators, I don't care. That's not what I was talking about. And I can understand about requesting like lingerie or candles or paddles or whatever. But these were very outrageous requests, like house payments and diamond bracelets and just ridiculous things. But, I don't shy away from things because people think that I need to follow a pattern here. I talk to you all about things that I think affect all of us, that people think about. Now, I'm not a shock jock. I'm not doing that because I'm looking to be controversial. I'm talking about things because, you know what, they're a part of our life. And we all have opinions. And I'm going to be very clear here. If you don't like me because you're happy with, as long as I follow a pattern and I talk to you about trauma and explain, and you love me for that, but you hate me because I have an opinion about other things, then you're being superficial, right? You're not going to get from me just what you want because it follows your status quo. I don't bend the knee. I don't believe in cancel culture. And you can threaten me with all of that, but I'm not going to stop doing what I do. I've been serving this community now for going on, 4 or 5 years, working a lot longer with the community for about a decade. I've been a part of it for 26 years. I'm a sadist. I'm a very happy sadist in my private life. None of that's going to ever get taken away, right? I know some of these things that I'm going to talk about are going to be upsetting, but that's okay because we have to talk about things, right? Jordan Peterson said it the best. Sometimes you have to risk being, to have a thought, you have to risk being offensive because not everything I'm going to say is going to react well with all of you. And that's not my intention. I'm not trying to upset you, but I am trying to get you to think. And that's a fair ask of me. That's a fair ask when I do that in therapy, right? So maybe before we respond and we get angry and we grab our pitchforks and want to string Chris up and burn him down, we start looking at the questions that are being asked instead of just being upset because the question was asked without reading it, right? So that's my soapbox of the day. But listen, let's talk about eroticism. Tell me what you think. Tell me how this affects your own life, right? Got one more show to do. It's going to be really all about you all. So we got one more show to do for next week, and that's it for the end of the year, y'all. So until next time, everybody, be safe, be safe.